This video is sponsored by Stack Audio, manufacturers of the Orva speaker and equipment isolation feet used by a British audiophile. For more information about these and other products, please click the link in the description. Hegel have a very typically Nordic attitude towards marketing. According to insiders, founder, owner and chief designer Ben Holter works away on various projects that may be of interest to him, and once he's ready, presents the basis of a new product to his team. There's nothing particularly unusual about that. Many hi-fi brands are centered around a particular hi-fi guru. What is unusual is what happens next. Normally when a product is launched, the marketing machine takes over and the press guys take artistic license with what the engineers have told them. Things seem to be different at Hegel. You get told about a few headline features, like the new H150 has a built-in phonostage and USB DAC input, that there's now DAC loop functionality, and the streaming module has been upgraded to the same one in the more expensive H400 and H600 amplifiers. But what you don't get told is in order to be happy with the phonostage, Ben had to make improvements to the power supply, making it quieter. That's what resulted in the H400 sounding significantly better than the H390, as I was able to confirm in A/B listening tests back in 2024. So how much difference does it make to the H150 over the outgoing H120 model? The new Hegel H150 retails for £2,750 in the UK. It's a full rack width unit measuring 8 centimeters high and weighing 9.5 kilograms. That's 3.2 inches and 21 pounds in old money. Hegel's styling always divides opinion, but for me it's right on point, conservative, with 2 large rotary dials for source selection and volume attenuation, flanking a clear OLED display. Like the front panel, both dials are machined out of aluminium and have a reassuring feel to them. A 6.3mm headphone jack and a nifty little remote control are also provided. Analog connections on the rear are to the left, with access to a moving magnet phonostage, analog output to connect to external power amps or powered subwoofers, but there's just one RCA input and one XLR balanced input, which may not be sufficient for all users. On the right hand side of the speaker terminals, the digital connections are more generous. The USB drive input for accessing stored media is new, and as always an Ethernet LAN port is provided to connect to the inbuilt streaming module. The coaxial digital output to connect to external DACs is also new over the old H120. Used with a streamer it can form a DAC loop. 1 coaxial, 2 optical and a USB input are provided for those who prefer to stick with the internal DAC. The first optical input is optimized for TV. It automatically wakes up when a signal is detected and is pre-programmed with certain TV remote codes for volume control. Who needs HDMI ARC? Taking a look inside the Hegel H150, nothing strikes you as being unusual or exceptional. It's a fairly conventional looking Class AB amplifier at first glance. Small little toroidal transformer for when the unit's in standby. The larger one powers the various sections. I'd say that's probably around 200, maybe 250 VA, which is reasonable for an amplifier that's rated at 75 watts into 8 ohms, stable into 4 and 2 ohms, although no power ratings stated on the website for those particular impedances. There's the power supply filter caps, and there's 4 of them, branded Hegel, each one's 10,000 microfarads, so 20,000 microfarads per side is basically the minimum that you'd expect to see. A few nice through-hole resistors around there, and it's the power supply section that has been improved in the H150 over the older model to lower the noise floor. What specifically they've done, they'll keep close to their chest. A little phonostage for the moving magnet phonostage board there, and the input section runs along the bottom, which you probably can't quite make out from this camera angle. This section, the lower part of it, is the DAC board, and it uses an AKM4493 SEQ chip, which is that chip there. Hopefully you can see that clearly. Little disappointed to find that, in fairness. It's a mid-tier AKM chip. At this kind of price, you'd like to think that they'd use a top-tier chip from AKM or ESS, either the 9039 Pro or the 4499 with the Velvet Sound technology that AKM use. So they've cheaped out a little bit there. That's the stream board, and I believe that's the identical one that they use in the bigger H400 and the H600. And this is the power amplifier section. So that's where Hegel amplifiers differ from conventional Class AB amplifiers, because they have a proprietary technology called Sound Engine, now in version 2, blue rectangles that you see there. And that's a feed-forward system. Essentially what it does is it reduces two types of distortion. Crossover distortion that's caused by transistors switching from one half the cycle to the other, and because biases can change with different temperatures, crossover distortion can vary, and it also eliminates the problem of a negative feedback loop causing group delay. It's a feed-forward system and it corrects in real time, and that's what Hegel have built their reputation on. That power amplifier section is identical to the one used in the H120, so it's unchanged. You have 4 output devices mounted to the heatsink. They're Toshiba bipolar junction transistors, and when you step up to the 190, you get double this amount of output devices for twice the current and twice the power. Obviously, you have to upgrade the power supply as well. So I'd expect a peak rating of around 10 amps for an amplifier like this. The other thing I want to comment about is that they do use a lot of surface mount components. Now in the preamplifier section, the phonostage, the DAC, the streamer, can understand that. I'd like to see in the power amplifier section a lot more of these through-hole components rather than these tiny surface mount components. They're capable of dissipating heat and handling power better. But overall, this is what I'd expect to see in a Hegel amplifier. Let's talk about the Hegel H150 as a straight amplifier. I'm not in a position to discuss the phonostage, and I'm going to leave my comments about the internal DAC until later. I never reviewed the old H120. It struck me as being very close in specification and design to the H95, which I did review. And I can confirm that now that they've made improvements in the power supply to accommodate the phonostage, that this H150 sounds noticeably better than the H95. The sound signature is very much Hegel in the sense that you get the impression that the signal is passing through the amplifier pretty much unaltered. There's no significant coloration on the warm or the cool side. There's more clarity across the bass, mids and highs. I don't have the H95 here at the same time, but the differences are not subtle when using my benchmark amplifier at this price as a common point of reference. Where the Exposure 2510 comfortably outclassed the H95 for overall fidelity, differences between the 2510 and the H150 are a lot more difficult to pick out. That's because there isn't much to tell them apart in the mid-range and upper registers. Both amplifiers extract an extraordinary amount of micro detail and produce beautiful harmonic structures. That slightly dry and artificial whiff that many Hegel amplifiers have had in the past is not present with the H150. Where the H150 edges ahead of my Exposure 2510 is in bass control, whether it's acoustic, electronic or drums producing the percussion. The low frequencies are more solid. This week's music suggestion is from the mighty Sam McLean. It's staggering that this man's talents weren't fully appreciated during his lifetime. There's plenty of great tracks across various albums, but if I could see from the Sledgehammer, Soul and Down Home Blues album is as good a place as any to start. Back to the review, and prices still seem to be creeping up in this market segment. The Exposure 2510 is now £500 more than when I reviewed it back in 2021. The H150 is also £400 more than the outgoing H120, but at least you get the phonostage and some internal improvements for that. Regardless, the value proposition in the sub £1,000 market is continually improving. For example, the new £699 Audiolab 6000A Mark II sounds better than its predecessor as well. It has a better DAC, HDMI ARC, and the price has only risen by 50 quid. These Hegel and exposure amplifiers are where you need to be in order to get a worthwhile improvement in performance over the entry Audiolab amplifier across the board. I normally advocate spending 3 times as much to ensure that the upgrade is beneficial. Sometimes that seems to extend to 4 times the original outlay these days. Just in case you're wondering, the Hegel H150 has better resolution than the Audiolab 9000A. Step up to the pre-power version with the 9000Q and 9000P, and now you're getting close. Whilst I'm at it, I may as well mention a few other popular amplifiers in this class that fall behind the H150 for detail retrieval and are more coloured on the warm side. The Cambridge Audio EXA100, Marantz Model 40N, Roxanne Caspian 4G, and the Quad 33303 pre-power. Above £3,000, the amplifier market seems to be saturated with even more brands competing for relatively few customers. That might be one reason why the H190V is only £500 more at £3,250, although by the time it gets the same treatment, I should imagine the model designation changes to 200, prices may creep up closer to £4,000. I'm just guessing, but I think that's probably what's likely to happen. In any case, the H190V is a much more substantial amplifier with twice the power. I'm still using the predecessor without the built-in phonostage and power supply tweaks, but I'll wager that the newer H190V sounds cleaner. It's actually the smaller Hegel amplifier that has the darker background with easy to drive speakers, micro details are better revealed and the stereo image is more focused, but the H190, thanks to its extra power and higher damping factor, produces a larger soundstage with greater dynamic shifts and better grip over demanding speakers. So what about the internal DAC, the internal streamer? Which speaker pairings were successful and which ones weren't? The Hegel H150 uses an AKM 4493 SEQ DAC chip. It's one of their mid-tier chips. It's well implemented but has its limitations. The sound quality is what I'd expect from equivalent chip-based DAC from Topping or SMSL that sells for around £250. That's how good those DACs have got these days. The streamer is also good enough to get you started. Connect the coaxial digital output from the H190 to the input of your external DAC and then the balanced XLR analog outputs from your DAC back to the amp. Press the play button on the remote control for 5 seconds to access the menus and switch the DAC loop function on. Now you can use the streaming module with an external DAC of your choice. But the Bluesound node Nano connected to a Denafrips Enyo 15th via optical sounds noticeably cleaner. I know it says Aries 12th, but it's the same DAC. That's what I would use to get a true sense of what this new Hegel amplifier is about, although it's capable of rewarding you as you step up into even better external streaming transports and external DACs. The H150 doesn't adequately drive the £1,800 Quad Revela 1s. Like almost all sub £3,000 integrated amplifiers I've encountered, the power supply is just not robust enough. They sounded small and soft. As expected, this was also the case with my vintage Product Response 1 SEs, whereas the extra grip and power of the H190 cleaned up the transients and opened up the soundstage nicely. Some stand mount speakers are really demanding of amplifiers, so that's what didn't work. What did work? The £800 Monitor Audio Silver 100 7Gs are ideal for those keeping the purse strings tight. The combination with the H150 was both dynamic and resolving. The £1,500 Dali Mini SEs disappeared, providing tighter stereo imaging in an even wider and deeper soundstage thanks to superior timing accuracy, although ideally I'd use a subwoofer to augment the bass. The new Acoustic Energy A1 40th anniversary speakers are also a great match, a revival of the classic British monitor that launched the brand. Watch out for the coming review. The key takeaway here is that the streaming module, the DAC and probably the phonostage are all very nice to have, but the amplifier section stacks up very well in its own right, and that's probably a good place to summarise what the H150 has to offer. In the process of trying to implement a phonostage that was fit for purpose, Hegel felt it was necessary to lower the noise floor of the amplifier by making improvements to the power supply. Whilst the new phonostage, streaming module, DAC and DAC loop function are all useful and likely to grab headlines, it's the actual improvement in the amplifier itself that's most worthwhile. This is a wonderfully detailed and natural sounding amplifier, but it's in danger of suffering from middle child syndrome. For just a few £100 more, there are amplifiers with a lot more power that will drive pretty much anything, including Hegel's own H190V, whereas you have to be a little bit more selective about the speaker choice with the 150, and that's the only reason I'm pulling it back from top honours. But if you've got easy to drive speakers, the likelihood is that this is all the amplifier you're going to need. The new Hegel H150 gets a very highly recommended from this channel. I was surprised as to how good this thing was compared to the H95 and my own 190. So my question for today is, what surprises have you had recently on your hi-fi journey? Please share that in the comments section. I'm sure you know what to do by now if you want to support me here on what I do. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Check me out on Patreon. There's a couple of tiers you can access there if you think I can help you on your audiophile journey. Also check out the ABA Club on Patreon, which has some great ways to interact with me and fellow Patreons. But for today, for now, British Audiophile, signing off.